Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chop It Up. We want to welcome back a friend of the show and a good friend of mine, Roman Tomashoff from Locked On Huskies. Roman, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Carter, thanks for having me. As I told you right before we press record here, doing a little babysitting. The world needs to say hello to my sister's cat, Mabel, who is going to be sitting on my lap for probably the entire show. I don't know how good her sports takes are, but I think we're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just fits the theme of today. For those of you that don't know, I'm back home for Christmas break, so we are in a little bit of a trophy room here with all the mounts that you can see behind me. For those of you that didn't tune into the last show we had with Roman, we both kind of have this weird fanatics with both the Washington Huskies and the New England Patriots, despite the fact that they're on different sides of the United States. So let's start it off with our former Washington Huskies quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. This weekend, it was announced that he's going to be the starter next week for the Falcons. Kirk Cousins just really hasn't been playing good ball lately. So Raheem Morris and company turned to Penix for the starting job. I want to get your take on this because I kind of have some thoughts of my own. I'm excited for Penix, but I think there are some problems that we may see him run into. But I want to start off with your opinion on this.
I'm the first thing to be completely honest, Carter. The first thing I thought when I saw that this news actually happened was finally, this is like 3 weeks at the very least overdue. That's I I'm trying to like not just go on an expletive laden rant about how frustrating it was to watch Kirk Cousins over the past month because we've seen Atlanta put a really good offense around him. They've got a great offensive line. They've got a nice number one receiver in Drake London. They've got one of the best running backs in football in Bijan Robinson, and arguably one of the best backup running backs in football in Tyler Algier. They've got a really fun combination of guys. It's not to mention Kyle Pitts, who high ceiling, still a big fan of what he can do. Been extremely frustrating to watch him play for basically his entire career at this point. But you see all that, and you see, okay, they're still like 1.5 games out of the playoff hunt at this point in time. So I look at that and I say, you need some kind of life in your offense because every time we saw Kirk Cousins, every single time, it was just nothing but a slow, lackadaisical offense that couldn't put up points. Again, one touchdown and 9 interceptions over the past 5 games. Been just horrible to watch, to be completely honest. And it was long overdue. I'm so excited to see Mike get a shot because, as you know, we know as anybody who watched the NFL draft knows his story, he deserves it. It's so long overdue.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. When I kind of, when it came out that he was going to get the starting job, I was excited for him. I think it's obviously an opportunity that he's been deserving of, especially looking at how Cousins has been playing the last couple weeks. And to be honest, I'm a Kirk Cousins guy. I really like him. I think he is talented, but at some point, like you mentioned, the one touchdown to 9 interception ratio, and you've been playing that poorly, especially at this stretch in the season when you want to be playing your best ball, trying to make a fight for the playoffs. You can't afford to have a quarterback who's just constantly turning the ball over. And so I think with Penix, not only is he a new quarterback and a new look for this offense, but the weapons that he has around him, like you mentioned, with London and Pitts and the running game that can support that. I think there's just so many options that he can go to where he doesn't have to bomb it 50 yards downfield like we know he can. He can find his options. He can rely on the run game. And unlike a lot of rookie quarterbacks that we see, it's not solely on him to create a spark. He has other weapons that can do that as well for him.
I agree. And let's take it one step further. Let's look at their schedule for the rest of the regular season, where the only team, they're still on the outside looking in of the NFC playoff, number 9 right now. They're right behind the Seattle Seahawks, who have a somewhat tough schedule. They're probably going to end up battling with the LA Rams for the division in week 18. That's going to be really interesting. But they play the New York Giants this weekend, and they play the Carolina Panthers in week 18. Notice how I skipped over week 17 because it's not necessarily as easy. They got the Washington Commanders on Sunday Night Football. Really fun to see what the true battle for the Heisman Trophy is going to be because, as you and I agree, Carter, he should have won the Heisman last year over Jaden Daniels, who stat padded against Army and whatever FCS school that the SEC loves to play, and then complaining they don't get into the playoffs with 3 losses. That's beside the point. But I look at that and I say you need life. You like there are 8.5 point favorites right now, I believe, over the New York Giants in this game. I think that they're going to find a way to win that game, and it really just feels like their whole season is going to be on the line next Sunday night when they take the field to play the Washington Commanders. And who gives you the best chance to win that game? It's not Kirk Cousins. We know it's not Kirk Cousins. They've got a solid pass rush. He threw for 115 yards, I think it was, against a terrible Las Vegas Raiders defense. Terrible defense. You cannot rightfully keep trotting him out there and saying, yes, we want to make the playoffs with this guy at the helm.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that, just in terms of the experience that Penix is going to be getting at this latter part of the season, a lot of times when we get rookie quarterbacks kind of thrown into these sort of situations, it's usually in the second half of the season when the starter has been playing poorly, like we've seen with Kirk Cousins. But typically, it's with the team that has been out of the playoff pictures for weeks, if not months at this point. But this isn't the case for Atlanta. They have a legitimate shot in a mediocre division, I'd say. I know the Bucks have been hot, but there's also been times where they haven't looked that great. So to be able to be in a position to make the playoffs and have that pressure on Penix's shoulders, sure, it may not work out the way the Falcons organization wants it to work out this season, but I think long term, allowing him to get this experience to try and make a playoff push and try to play his best ball late in the season when he hasn't been getting this reps, these live reps on the field with the team, I think it's going to be really important. I think it's going to pay dividends down the road for this Atlanta team. So I'm really just excited to see Mike out there. I'm a big fan. I mean, he throws one of the most beautiful balls that I've ever seen in
Oh
football,
man.
whether it's college, NFL. I mean, as soon as he launches that thing, you know it's getting put right on a dime. So really excited for Mike there. Let's switch it over to our fandom of the Patriots. As our former coach, Bill Belichick, last week took the job at Chapel Hill, taking the head coaching position there at North Carolina. I was shocked by this move. I think a lot of people were. Once again, I want to get your thoughts on this because I have some of my own. But I think we might be thinking pretty similarly here.
Yeah, shocked is the only word to describe this, right? Where I look at this and the rumors were floated and I had plenty of people ask me on Twitter or text me or whatever, people in Boston, people here in Seattle, whatever it might be. And they're like, hey, we want to get your thoughts on this. And I said the only move like it because as it even continued to become more and more like I still just said until I see pen hit paper, I don't believe this. And I understand why it happened. I want to because this is a guy who spent what 40 something years in the NFL, almost 50 years coaching at the NFL level, whether it be as a defensive coordinator, as a head coach. And you can look at that and you can say, yeah, this is a really, really shocking move to see because of somebody who spent that long. But the more you take a step back, Carter, the longer we've had to kind of sit here and digest this, the more I understand this, where he reached out to the New York Jets. The New York Jets didn't seem too interested, where that's an organization that's not too interested with you. There, there are a lot of things to consider there, and I think this is the number one thing. What Bill Belichick wanted was total control of an organization, and I don't think an organization wanted to give him that. Where he wanted to be the GM, he wanted to be the head coach, he wanted total control of the roster, and in this day and age of football, not only is that not going to work anymore, I think you probably agree with me when I say this. I look at the Patriots roster right now, and I think I would keep three players that Belichick has drafted over the last 5 years. Where that's Christian Barmore, that's Christian Gonzalez, and that's Keon White. Where I like Juwan Bentley, I like Kyle Duggar, but I look at that and I say I think Kyle Duggar would probably be included in that. Those are the only players from the Bill Belichick era of drafts that right now I would keep on this roster. And I think that other NFL teams do that. I think that's why he didn't get a job in the last cycle. And I think you can look at that and say teams are very rightful to be wary of that.
I think you're spot on there. And I think, when you look at Belichick and his time in New England, one of the things he did so well was just being able to take talent that really didn't have a lot of hype coming in, outside of Brady and Edelman and Gronk and the obvious stars that the Patriots had. Really, Belichick's whole focus was being able to take underdeveloped guys, be able to find them a role and have them excel in that role that he put them in. And as great as that is to be able to develop kind of hidden talent, I guess you could say, or diamonds in the rough, at some point you have to draft someone who is just legitimately talented and can play at a high level. Like,
Right.
don't make it harder on yourself by taking the guy from Boston Community College down the road. Take the 5-star recruit from LSU who's been tearing it up all year long. It's no different than, when they were looking for a weapon in a wide receiver, and instead of taking DK Metcalf or a high caliber wide receiver, they settle for N'Keal Harry, who's been bouncing around the NFL for years.
So I was really high on the N'Keal Harry pick at the time. I'll be completely honest about that. I didn't hate that. When you looked at the draft, there were questions about AJ Brown. I don't like I Debo Samuel is the next wide receiver off the board. I personally don't think he would have fit in the Patriot system. I think he would have been horribly, horribly mismanaged, gone somewhere else, and succeeded if he was able to stay healthy. Uh, I'm not even going to get into the whole "hey, get me the ball" thing that we see going on with him at this point in time. But I don't know if that was necessarily his worst pick, but I think it's more of an overarching conversation where we've seen him make some great picks on defense. Again, I just referenced Christian Gonzalez, slam dunk pick. The shout out to the Commanders for taking Emmanuel Forbes over him, who they just released a couple of weeks ago. Terrible pick on their part, but hey, I'm not going to complain. Christian Barmore, good pick. Keon White, good pick. Kyle Duggar, good pick. They are out there, but what do those guys all have in common? They all play defense. Who is the last slam dunk offensive draft pick that you can look at that the Patriots even signed to a second contract? The fact that I don't really have a name right off the top of my head and might have to go all the way back to somebody like James White is concerning. And that's one of the big things. It's if you're not able to evaluate and develop offensive talent without Tom Brady, that's a huge concern.
Yeah, no doubt. The last thing I want to hit on with Belichick here, obviously, taking this role in college football is completely different than what it was even at this time last year, but especially the last decade or so. Do you think he's going to have instant success in North Carolina? What do you think this 5-year window kind of looks for Belichick there in Chapel Hill?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Carter. I think we're going to see good success in year one. I think that the ACC is the perfect conference for him to go to and say, "Hey, I can do this, I can do that, I can do X, Y, and Z. Build up a good defense, figure it out on the offensive side of the ball." If I don't have Matt Patricia calling my plays, again, that's a rant that we don't need to get into at this point in time. I look at all those sorts of things and I say, yeah, for sure, he could come in and be a top four team in the ACC right away because of the level of competition he's going to face. What I'm most curious about is what's that recruiting pitch going to look like? We know that UNC is saying, hey, we're going to invest 20 mil, whatever you want to call it, in NIL. We'll see what that looks like. But I think he's going to have success. I don't think that he's going to turn UNC into the, proverbial powerhouse that some might expect from what we saw Bill Belichick do in New England, but I don't think it's going to be bad.
I'm right there with you. I kind of feel the same way about Belichick almost that I do about Penix with Atlanta. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think early on in this window, I think there's going to be a lot of guys, especially in the portal, that think they want to play for Belichick, and then they're going to
Sure.
get there and they're going to realize, oh, this guy is, way too hard, and I don't really want to play for a guy like this. I'm in college. I'm 19 years old. I want to be able to play football and also enjoy myself, and that's not really Belichick's go-to. So I think, eventually he's going to be able to get the guys that he knows belong there, that they know that they can play under him as a head coach. And so I think in these first couple of years, I expect this team to be, hovering around 7, 8 wins, probably being competitive in the ACC just because of how weak that conference is. But I think towards the back half of this 5-year contract, as long as he stays there, I think we could really see some success. We know he's going to have an elite coaching staff. We know North Carolina is going to be one of the most disciplined teams in all of football just because that's how you have to play under Bill Belichick. And so I think the first half of this contract, it could be rough. I think it's going to be hard for him to navigate the waters of the portal and recruiting and just dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds instead of 25 to 30-year-olds.
Right.
But then on the back half, I think once he gets a feel for it, once he gets the recruiting, like we just talked about, I think this North Carolina team could make some legit noise. Now, do I think they're going to be up there with Georgia and Bama and Oregon and Ohio State? Probably not. But I think we could see them in like that Penn State, Ole Miss, 8 to 12 team range, making some noise, runner up in their conference, something like that. Especially if the ACC continues to be weak, then I think North Carolina could certainly be a contender there. I think the funniest part of him taking this job is the whole recruiting pitch and just having to be really personal with guys because in recruiting you do have to have some sort of personal appeal to young athletes and young kids. And I just don't see him going into a 5 star's house and being like, look, I mean, you're pretty good. We don't know where you're going to play, but we'll find a spot for you. Like, I just don't see that happening with him whatsoever. I know that was a terrible impression, but I
No,
just don't see him
hats off to you.
doing
That was a fantastic impression. I loved it. That was like you make a lot of great points in there, but I think the Belichick impression was the best part there.
that. Well, I appreciate it. So, we're going to get into our main part of the show here. College football playoff starts Friday night, first round. And then as the weeks continue, we'll see this thing progress. First year, the 12-team playoff. We'll go through the first round and then we'll kind of just make our picks throughout the bracket. March Madness style. We'll start it off with the top of the bracket. Dabo Sweeney and Clemson heading down to Austin to take on the Longhorns of Texas. Who do you like in this one?
I like Texas. I think they would big here personally. This is a really, really talented Texas team. And I'm really, we're going to get into this a little bit later on, I'm sure. But I'm really curious about what this Texas team can do. The biggest question I have about them is what's quarterback going to look like? Carter, I got to watch Quinn Ewers play in person last year in the Sugar Bowl. I was not impressed. I don't see a first round quarterback, Quinn Ewers. I think that could be their biggest holdup. I think they have a fantastic defense. I think they've got a great offensive line. I think they've got really talented skill players. What's Quinn Ewers going to do? And on top of that, are we going to see Arch Manning? How much are we going to see Arch Manning? These are all questions that I have that aren't going to be answered until they step on the field. That being said, I think that there's a big, this isn't, the Clemson team that I was in college with. When we watched Dexter Lawrence, we watched all those guys on their defensive line. So I really think Texas would be big in this game.
I'm right there with you. I was listening to something the other day. I think it was Danny Cannell, and he was talking about how Clemson's defense has been pretty good, and this feels like a Dabo game. And, sure, maybe if Quinn Ewers plays the worst game of his life and Texas just can't get anything going, maybe Clemson has a chance. But I just think in Austin, that crowd's going to be rocking. That's a hard place to play. And I think you're right when you say Quinn Ewers hasn't been playing good ball, but I think being at home definitely benefits him a lot. And so I see him playing somewhat comfortably here. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of Arch Manning sprinkled in throughout this game, but I have Texas in a big one here as well. So moving down, I think, in my opinion, this is the best matchup we have in the first round. Number 9, Tennessee going to the shoe to take on Ohio State. Ohio State obviously just had that brutal loss to Michigan a few weeks back. I like the Buckeyes in this one. I think them being at home gives them an advantage. I think Ryan Day, he's been taking a lot of heat. I actually do think he's a good coach. I just think he has some sort of mental problems. Maybe it's the yips with Michigan. I don't really know. But I think Ohio State's going to be ready to roll. I still have confidence in this team. But who do you like heading into this big time matchup?
I'm with you. I like Ohio State. I think that Tennessee's got a lot of talent. I think Nico Iamaleava is a very fun quarterback to watch. I love James Pierce Jr., love that edge rusher. But I look at that talent and I look at where Ohio State is. And Ohio State has one of the most expensive rosters in the country for a reason. They are all in on winning a national championship this year. I'm just like with Texas, the biggest question I have about them is at quarterback. Carter, I don't know what you were doing for the end of this game, as you and I are both, in the Oregon hater mold, which is wonderful, and I love that about both of us. But I remember watching the end of that Oregon Ohio State game, screaming so loud that everybody in my apartment building probably heard me. What are you doing? Get rid of the football. Do something. That was one of the worst plays I have ever seen in my entire life. I've seen a lot of terrible football plays. I watch too much football. I've never seen somebody, a 50-year senior quarterback or whatever year senior he is, make a play that is that horribly mismanaged and just that horribly unaware of the situation and where you are on the field and what's going on. That was just absolutely maddening to watch. That is the biggest question I have about this Ohio State team, outside of Ryan Day, is the quarterback position. I have not been impressed with a lot of the quarterback play. Maybe we're spoiled by watching Michael Penix, watching what last year was across college football. But I think Ohio State has the potential to reach the national championship game, to win it all. But I think Will Howard and Ryan Day are the biggest question marks, the biggest things that could potentially be holding them back.
Yeah, to add on to what you said about Will Howard, it's interesting because I feel like we've seen him in press conferences, whether it was the Penn State game or heading into Michigan, and he just has this competitive feel, and you can visually
Yeah.
see that he's like, I came here to beat Michigan. Like when it was Penn State, he said, Penn State didn't recruit me. I wanted to go to Penn State. They didn't want me. And those are probably the two worst games he's had all year. And so I know as competitive as he is, but as a quarterback, he almost just has to chill out a little bit. I think last year, you mentioned Penix. He was in probably like the most competitive games out of any quarterback in all of college football last year. He was calm, he was collected, and that's what you have to see out of your captain and out of your quarterback. And so I think for Will Howard, the biggest thing as he continues to grow and to mature is to just relax. Like you're going to be at home, the crowd's going to be behind you. You have a strong defense. Like just go out there and play ball. Don't be so worked up on making it personal. Just go out there, play your brand of football, rely on the run game. You have two of the best running backs in all of college football. And so I think he will figure that out. And that's why I think we're both rocking with the Buckeyes on this one. Moving down to what I think is going to be the most lopsided game this weekend, Penn State and SMU in Happy Valley. Looks like it's going to be a whiteout game there for the Nittany Lions. I have Penn State by a billion, but maybe you have different thoughts. But I think Penn State's just going to roll them here.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Where this is something that you and I saw when Washington went out to Happy Valley. It's Penn State's advantage in the trenches. Penn State's offensive line was absolutely fantastic in that Big Ten championship game. I know they lost that game, but I'm a huge fan of what they can do on both sides of the ball. I think Abdul Carter is the best player in this game. So I'm going to echo your sentiment there. I'm going to say it as nicely as I possibly can because I have some friends that work in and around the SMU program. Shout out to them. So I'm just going to say, yeah, I think Penn State wins this game, and I'm going to leave it there.
I think that's a good way to put it. I think SMU is a great story, especially if you consider the
Agreed.
history of their program and where they've been. But all good stories have a last chapter, and I think this might be it for SMU this year. Last first round game taking place tomorrow night, Friday in South Bend, Indiana, Notre Dame, a little in-state battle there. I have the Hoosiers in this one. I
Yeah.
don't like Notre Dame. I think the Northern Illinois loss, yes, they've been playing good ball since then, but it's pretty easy to play good ball when all you're playing is the armed forces and a couple junior colleges. And so I think the fact that Notre Dame lost at Northern Illinois at home, I understand that that was months ago at this point, but still just not a great look for me. And I know Indiana had their biggest game of the year in the shoe, and they didn't really show up for that one. But I trust Kurt Signetti. I think he's a good coach. I like what I've seen just in terms of offensively for this Indiana team. I think they'll be able to score points on Notre Dame defense, despite how stout Marcus Freeman has his squad looking. I think it will be a close game. Like, I'm not going to be surprised if Notre Dame squeaks it out by a field goal or a touchdown or something. I just like kind of the aura, I guess you could say, this Indiana team, and I just like what they bring to the table.
It's that certain four-letter word, right? And Kurt Signetti absolutely brings that to the table. He's so much fun to watch. Watching this Indiana team has been so impressive all season long, where Notre Dame has more talent. Let's be completely honest about that. And as you said, Marcus Freeman's got those boys rolling. They looked really good in that win over USC. They absolutely deserve to be a playoff team. This is going to be the closest game of these four, and it's not close, in my opinion. And the more I look at this, the more I do want to say, yeah, Notre Dame's got this, Notre Dame's got that. I think Notre Dame, whose best player is Benjamin Morrison, who's not going to be playing in this game. I I don't know, man. I think Kurt Signetti just he's got it. He's got the scheme. He's got all the different things. And I got to bring it back to the aura. I was absolutely sold with that introductory press conference at Google Me. I just win. Yes, that's exactly the kind of guy I'd want to play for. I think he's going to do a great job building that program up in the years to come after signing that contract extension. Yeah, I've got Indiana in a tight one here.
All right. Well, after the first round, so far we're all on the same page. All is well. So we're gonna break it down to the second round here, the playoff quarterfinals. The only real difference with these games is they get moved to neutral site, somewhat neutral site bowl games. And so as we break down the list, we started off at the top again with Texas, who we both had beating Clemson. They will take on Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham has this team looking hot right now, coming off the Big 12 championship. I think Kenny Dillingham's kind of a psycho, but I'm kind of here for it. I like his approach. I think you kind of have to have that a little bit, especially as a young coach taking over a somewhat smaller program in the Big 12. I think Texas destroys Arizona State. I think there's a world where maybe the Sun Devils could make some noise, make it more interesting than people think. But I think when it comes down to the trenches, Texas is just going to be too overwhelming, I think, to handle Arizona State.
Carter, we haven't had a lot of differences so far, and I'm 100% with you on this one as well. Where Texas is just overwhelming. I love Cam Scatterbo. He has been so much fun to watch all season long. But yeah, it's the same thing we talk about with Penn State and SMU. Texas's biggest advantage in the game is in the trenches, and I think they have the manpower and the strength and the physicality needed to overwhelm and not get out schemed is the best way to put it. Where Kenny Dillingham, absolutely fantastic coach. I've been so impressed with what he's done there so far. But in the same vein, the more I look at it, the more I say, yeah, this is one of those games where Texas has everything they need in terms of the bodies, especially in the front seven, to negate what Arizona State's biggest strength has been this season.
Let's take it down to the Rose Bowl and who what we will or and what we believe will be another rematch between Ohio State and Oregon in the granddaddy of them all. It seems like these teams have played each other a billion times in the Rose Bowl, and I actually don't know if Oregon's ever beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl because I know they hadn't beat them for a long time before the last couple of years where the Ducks have gotten the better of the Buckeyes. I think this is going to be a great game. I'm going to be down there in Southern California. I think the atmosphere is going to be electric in Pasadena. And I just think whether it's college football, college basketball, no matter what sport you're playing, it is so hard to beat a team twice when both teams are playing at such a high level.
Yep.
And that's why I'm going to take the Buckeyes in this one. And honestly, this is Oregon hatred aside. I think Ohio State probably should have won the first game. I think they played a little bit better. They didn't execute when they needed to, and ultimately that cost them the game there in Eugene. I just think that Ryan Day is going to have this team ready to go, and there's just something that tells me Ohio State's going to be able to find a way to win this one.
So I'm with you again here. We're just in complete lockstep
On a
today.
roll.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you said it best. It's very hard to beat a team twice, but on top of that, I talked about it a few minutes ago just how frustrating those some of those Will Howard decisions were at the end of the game. You've got to learn from your mistakes. You've got to do all those things. And if Ryan Day, I know what Ohio State's athletic director said, saying, "Hey, we've got complete faith in him. We got complete confidence in Ryan Day. He's going to be back." Take that. You're gonna have if you want to have your team really up and rolling. Show that you can at least make the semifinal this year because you have a team that is supposed to, with what you spent on it, with what you've invested in this roster, you are supposed to win the national championship. I think that Oregon and Ohio State have the two best rosters in college football. And I truly believe that if this is the matchup that we're going to see in the Rose Bowl, it will be the most fun game of this entire 12 team playoff. And yeah, we had Oregon 1-1 this past time. I think Ohio State wins by a field goal this time around.
I like that pick. I need to give a quick shout out to my guy, Kyle Clements, down there in Southern Oregon. I went on his radio show, teed up Southern Oregon a couple weeks ago. I said Oregon was going to make the national championship game. I've since retracted that pick. I put a little bit more thought into it, had some time to break it down. He caught me off guard a little bit there. I wasn't ready. We were kind of bashing Ohio State, so it didn't really make sense to say they're going to make the national championship game after. But I've since changed my mind, and I'm rocking with the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl. Let's take it down to Glendale, keeping it in the west part of the country. Penn State, Boise State. I'm going to let you go first because I have some pretty strong takes on this game.
Ooh, I think I know where you're going to go with this. And I love this Boise State team. Ashton Jeanty has been far and away my favorite player to watch in all of college football this season. I want to say that first. He should have won the Heisman. Absolutely should have won the Heisman.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
no doubt in my mind about that. So frustrating. I even, put the snap thing aside where I know that's an argument for Travis Hunter. He played very well on both sides of the ball. Don't want to take anything away from him. Ashton Jeanty had a historic season. Historic season. They're not going to win this game. I it's unfortunate to see that season come to an end this way, but it's the exact same advantage that we just talked about with Texas a few minutes ago. They don't have it in the trenches. They've been able to do it. They did a really good job holding on against Oregon, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that again. It's unfortunate, but I think Penn State wins this game by 2 touchdowns.
No, I think that's totally valid too. And I think when you look at the way Penn State's been playing, even in the Big Ten championship game, I know they lost, but I almost have more confidence in that team since that game just because of how their offense played. And obviously the defense was suspect, but that's bound to happen when you're running up against an offense like Oregon. So I think Penn State, I mean, that's totally valid. I think they could be a really good team. And especially when you look at their path, if they already get past Boise, you never know what you're going to see with Georgia. We don't really know what's going on with Carson Beck. Like you could legitimately make
Yeah.
a case to see Penn State in the national championship game, which is just kind of crazy because they haven't really been viewed as a national championship team so far this season. But this is going to be a PSA to all my friends out there in Idaho, all my homies from Boise. I hope you guys are tuning in right now. The Fiesta Bowl is the home away from home for this Boise State Broncos team. They've had success, whether it was Kellen Moore or Coach P. No matter what, when the Broncos go to Glendale, they're going down there to play big-time football, and they're going down there to play spoiler. Like you said, Ashton Jeanty should have won the Heisman. I don't know if you saw his interview after the game, but he was pissed that he didn't win the Heisman Trophy because he knows, America knows, he should have won that trophy. I know Penn State's defense is legit, I don't think it's going to matter. I think they made the wrong guy mad. I think Ashton Genty is going to go nuclear. I think my guy Mad Dog Madsen is going to play his best game of football yet. I know it's a bold take. I know it's probably not the right take, but I'm going to take Boise State to win this game. I just have a feeling. I like the swagger of this Broncos team. I think there's something to be said about those people that play hard-nosed football from Idaho out there in potato country. So, as an honorary Boise State fan, a part of me bleeds blue this season, and I'm going to take the Boise State Broncos to beat Penn State in this game. We'll see if it's right. I hope it is. I wouldn't be shocked if
That'd be
it's not,
fun.
but I'm rocking with the Broncos. So, all right, let's get down to it. We both had Indiana beating Notre Dame. Indiana would play Georgia. No one really knows what's going on with Georgia right now due to the Carson Beck injury. I don't think it's really going to matter. I think Georgia, kind of like we've talked about with Texas, I think they're just going to be able to out physical teams in the trenches, whether it's Gunnar Stockton behind center or Carson Beck. I just think they're going to be able to out physical Indiana if that's who they end up facing. I'm going to take the Bulldogs in this one, but who do you like?
I'm with you. I got Georgia here. I do have questions about Carson Beck, but I think we're going to talk about that a little more going forward. So we'll get to those in a minute.
Yeah. All right, we're down to our final four. We got Tennessee, Ohio State. We split on Penn State and Boise, and then we have Georgia. So that brings us to Texas and Ohio State in a big time matchup. I think this could be a really good game if these two teams end up facing each other. I went back and forth on this morning. I'm going to roll with Ohio State just because I trust them a little bit more, especially defensively. I think the quarterback situation could be a toss up. I think it honestly could be a battle of who just shows up on that day. If Ewers balls out, then I think Texas could take it. There's just a part of me that trusts Will Howard a little bit more, and I think part of that is because I think he has a better supporting cast with the run game. I'm going to take the Buckeyes in this one, but I think it's going to be really close.
Carter, we really are in lockstep today. I was really just about to say I feel like I'm crazy for saying that I would trust Will Howard more in this game. That I think he might be a better quarterback in this game. That's how not sold I am on Quinn Ewers. I feel like that it says more about him than it does about Will Howard. But I agree with you. This could be the second most fun matchup, even if it's Oregon Texas in this game. This would be the second most fun matchup of any game that we see throughout the course of this 12 team playoff. I do have Ohio State winning this one. It just that roster, it has everything it needs. That's the biggest thing. And Carter, you and I both know we've seen Steve Sarkisian not show up in big games just like Ryan Day. This could very well be 2.0 of that, or 3.0 really, if you want to call the Alamo Bowl a big game. Shout out to Washington there. But I look at that and I say I really, really have a hard time trusting either coach in this game. But we've seen Ryan Day do it with CJ Stroud, so I've got to stick on Ohio State for this one.
We're just on a roll. We're on the same wavelength
Yeah,
this
we are.
morning. We're either going to look like geniuses or we're going to get to round two and we're going to look like complete idiots. But nevertheless, we're having fun out here. Let's take it down south. Penn State taking on Georgia, at least how your predictions have it. I
Yep.
had Boise State. I think no matter what, whether it's Penn State or Boise taking on Georgia, I think by this point I would expect Carson Beck to be back unless it's a really serious injury that we don't know of. It's going to be a toss up. It's really just hard to guess this game because if Beck's back, I probably roll with Georgia. If he's not, I like Penn State or Boise a little bit more. I'm just going to take Georgia regardless. I think Kirby always finds a way to win games when his team's counted out. I really like the coaching. I like what I've seen defensively from this Georgia front. I think no matter who's going to be playing quarterback for them, this defense is going to be able to give their offense opportunities to score. Now, how efficient is that offense? That's going to be kind of up to be determined until we see who the quarterback situation is going to be. But I'm going to roll with Georgia in this one. I have them beating Boise State. You have them playing Penn State. What do you think?
Yeah, the Carson Beck thing really scares me. But in the same vein, I do think that this Georgia defense is the perfect answer for what Penn State likes to do offensively. So it's really hard because I do believe that if Carson Beck is not under center in that game, that they can lose it. That they very well can lose that game. But I think the defense might be a little too much. I'm not completely sold on Drew Aller. I think he's got amazing upside, but I'm not completely sold. And I think that Kirby Smart is the perfect guy to take advantage of that.
No, I think you're 100% right. I think Kirby's just his ability to win games that no one really thinks he can, besides Alabama. I think he's just a really elite coach, and this Georgia team's been up and down a couple times, whether it was the Bama game or Ole Miss later in the season. Obviously, the Georgia Tech game was a little bit of a scare there. I just trust Kirby. I trust Georgia, and I'm definitely not an SEC homer, but I do think that there is something to be said about a team that has been resilient, has been punched in the mouth this season, and can still show up when it matters most. And this wouldn't be the first time we've seen a team like Georgia really do that. So I think it's a safe pick to roll with the Bulldogs on this one. We have the same national championship, Ohio State, Georgia. Both mediocre quarterback play from these two teams at times. At other times, they've looked elite. Um, Obviously, it's not really a surprise. These are two of the most touted programs in all of college football. I went back and forth on this one as well. There's just something about this Ohio State team that I like. I can't put my finger on it. The Michigan game didn't really help me because I was really confident that this Ohio State team was going to go to Indy, win the Big Ten championship game, and just kind of find their swagger and their groove heading into the playoffs. That obviously didn't happen, but I'm still going to roll with the Buckeyes on this one. I think I can just see the storyline of Ryan Day almost getting fired because he loses to Michigan, people wanting his job, people calling for his head, and then he turns around and wins the national championship. Just seems like a very Ohio State college football kind of thing to happen this year, especially with how chaotic this season has been. I'm going to roll with the Buckeyes on this one. So, yeah, I think Ryan Day is going to be a national champion, and I don't think that's what many people expect, especially at this
No,
point in the season.
definitely not. So two things, Carter. The first one, no, I think Kirby Smart is the best motivator we have ever seen. Nobody, I mean nobody, can make a roster full of 5 stars think that they're a 6-6 team, quite like Kirby Smart. It's truly amazing to just hear some of the quotes come out of the program. That being said, I'm 100% with you. Ohio State has too much invested in this roster to lose now, to find a way to mess it up. And it all comes down to the Carson Beck thing again, where I truly am concerned about his injury from just some of the things that I've heard that we'll see how true they are. I'm not necessarily sure on that front, but I do have Ohio State winning this game. I think that, I talked about Kirby Smart being the perfect guy to take advantage of Penn State. On the other side of that, I think that this Ohio State receiving core is the perfect, just talented bunch to take advantage of Georgia's defense. I think it's going to be a hard fought, low scoring game. But I think that true freshman Jeremiah Smith has a big moment in the fourth quarter. That's me looking at my crystal ball there, and I think he wins Ohio State that game.
Well, there you have it. That is our 2024-25 college football playoff bracket. Basically the same. I think we had one game difference there in the Fiesta Bowl. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. The Zoom timer is less than a minute. So, Roman, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. Go check him out at Locked On Huskies and the Huskies Wire as we get into the recruiting season for all teams college football. Be sure to go check Roman out. Thanks for coming on, man. Enjoy your Christmas break and just the holiday season.
Carter, thanks for having me and appreciate everything you do.